We often think of faith as something born in grand cathedrals, in gilded halls, where incense fills the air and prayers echo off marble walls. But the most powerful acts of faith, the ones that truly change the world, often begin in the quietest of places. In the heart of a tired mother, in the clink of a few coins dropped into an old clay pot. This is a story about one of those quiet places, and how a simple act of kindness by a man who would one day become Pope Leo XIV planted a seed of hope that would blossom into a miracle 20 years later. 2 decades ago, long before he was the Holy Father, he was Cardinal Albanelli, and he had a secret sanctuary. It wasn't a private chapel or a hidden library in the Vatican. It was a small, humble cafe on a cobblestone street in Rome, a place where the steam from the espresso machine fogged the windows, and the smell of fresh pastries offered a small comfort from the weight of the world. He would go there late at night to sit and read, to be just a man for an hour or two. And that is where he met Lucia. She was a waitress in her 40s, a widow with kind eyes that couldn't quite hide the bone-deep exhaustion she carried with her. She moved with a quiet grace, refilling coffee cups and wiping down tables, always with a gentle smile for her customers. The cardinal had watched her for months. He saw how she treated everyone the same, from the wealthy merchant to the poor street sweeper seeking warmth. One rainy autumn night, the cafe was nearly empty. The cardinal noticed Lucia seemed more worried than usual. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. When she brought his coffee, he set his book down and asked her, "Lucia, forgive me for prying, but you seem to carry a heavy burden tonight. Is everything all right?" She paused, surprised that anyone of his stature would notice. She looked away for a moment, then sighed softly. "It is my daughter, Your Eminence. My Sophia." Her face softened as she spoke the name. "She is a brilliant girl, so smart. She dreams of becoming a doctor." Lucia's voice was a mix of pride and pain. "But we have nothing. I'm trying to save, but a doctor's education. It feels like trying to fill the ocean with a teaspoon." She hesitated, then seemed to decide that this quiet, kind man could be trusted. "I have this old terracotta pot in my kitchen," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "For 8 years now, every single coin I receive in tips goes into that pot. I work double shifts. I take any extra hour I can. That pot, Eminence, that pot holds my daughter's entire future." The cardinal was deeply moved. In a city of immense wealth and power, here was a woman building a future for her child out of sheer love and loose change. Her quiet, unrelenting sacrifice was a prayer more powerful than any he had heard in a long time. When he got up to leave, he placed a bill on the table, folded neatly. It was far, far more than his coffee had cost. Lucia's eyes widened in disbelief. "Eminence, this is too much. I cannot." He gently placed his hand over hers. "This is not for the coffee, Lucia," he said, his voice full of warmth. "This is for the pot, for Sophia's dream." He walked out into the rainy Roman night, never imagining it would be 20 years before he would learn what became of that mother, her daughter, and the hope they kept in a simple clay pot. But before we dive in, tell me where you're watching us from, and may God bless you wherever you are. Now let's begin. 20 years is a long time. Empires can shift, fortunes can be made and lost, and a humble cardinal can be called by God to become the spiritual father to 1 billion souls. Pope Leo XIV now sat in an office where decisions could shape history. The quiet nights in the little cafe were a distant, cherished memory, a lifetime away. His days were filled with meetings, encyclicals, and the immense weight of his sacred duty. He was reviewing the weekly reports from the office of the Papal Almoner, the arm of the Vatican that carries out acts of charity in his name. It was a long list of requests: funding for orphanages, aid for refugees, support for struggling parishes across the globe. His eyes scanned the pages, line after line of human need. And then he stopped. It was a small item easily missed. A humble request from a free clinic operating in a forgotten, poverty-stricken suburb of Rome. They were asking for funds to purchase the most basic of medical supplies: bandages, antibiotics, insulin. But it wasn't the request that caught his eye. It was the name signed at the bottom of the letter. Dr. Sophia Rossi. The name echoed in his memory, a faint whisper from the past. Sophia Rossi. He leaned back in his chair, the papers resting in his hands. He closed his eyes, and suddenly he could smell the rain on the cobblestones and the rich aroma of coffee. He saw a tired woman's face, illuminated by the warm light of the cafe, her voice full of a desperate, beautiful hope as she spoke of her daughter. The girl who dreamed of becoming a doctor. Could it be? After all these years? His secretary had attached a brief summary to the request. It noted that Dr. Rossi was the clinic's founder and director, a brilliant young physician who worked tirelessly for the city's poorest residents. The summary mentioned she had graduated with the highest honors and was the first in her family to ever attend a university. The final line of the summary solidified the memory into a certainty. It said she was known in her community as the daughter of a waitress who had single-handedly saved for her education. The Pope put the papers down on his desk. A shiver ran through him, the kind that comes not from cold, but from the profound sense of a circle closing. The dream held within that old terracotta pot had come true. Sophia had become a doctor, but the story wasn't over. The report detailed the clinic's desperate lack of resources and Dr. Rossi's own crushing student debt. The woman who was dedicating her life to healing the poor was herself trapped in a struggle she could not overcome. The Pope knew in that moment that this was no coincidence. God had not allowed him to forget that rainy night for a reason, and now he was asking for that story to be finished. A simple approval of the clinic's request would have been easy. A check would be sent, a formal letter of thanks would be returned, and the matter would be closed. But for Pope Leo XIV, this was no longer a matter of administrative charity. It was a personal debt of the heart. He called his private secretary, an elderly and discreet Monsignor named Dario, into his office. "Dario," the Pope began, his voice low and serious, "I need you to find someone for me. A woman named Lucia Rossi. Her daughter Sophia is a doctor who runs a clinic in the San Basilio district." He handed the report to his secretary. "I need to know their circumstances, the full story. But you must do this with the utmost delicacy. These are good, proud people. I do not want them to feel like they are being investigated. Be a shadow, Dario. Be gentle." The Monsignor, who had served the Pope for many years, understood immediately. This was not a command from a sovereign, but a request from a pastor concerned for his flock. He simply nodded and left. 3 days later, Dario returned. He stood before the Pope's desk, his face etched with a somber compassion. "I have the information you requested, Your Holiness," he said quietly. The story he told was one of quiet, heartbreaking struggle. Dr. Sophia Rossi was everything the report said and more, a beacon of hope in her community. But she was trapped, working 70-hour weeks for a salary that barely covered the clinic's rent and her own student loan payments. She lived in a tiny apartment above the clinic, subsisting on simple meals, pouring every ounce of her energy into her patients. Then Dario spoke of Lucia. She was 59 years old. She had lost her job at the cafe during an economic downturn years ago. She now worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices in the early morning and washing dishes at a small restaurant late at night. She lived in the same small apartment, her hands now gnarled with arthritis, her steps slower. But the most devastating news came last. "Lucia is unwell, Holiness," Dario said softly. "She was diagnosed with diabetes 2 years ago. The medicine is expensive." He took a deep breath before continuing. "We learned from the local pharmacist that she only buys half of her prescribed insulin each month. She has been rationing her doses, endangering her own life so as not to be a financial burden on her daughter." The Pope closed his eyes. The image was painfully clear in his mind. The same woman who had poured every spare coin into a clay pot for her daughter's future was now pouring out her own life, drop by drop, for the very same reason. Her sacrifice had never ended. It had simply changed its form. He sat in silence for a long time, the weight of that hidden love settling upon him. Then he looked at his secretary, his eyes clear and full of resolve. This was not a problem to be solved with a simple check. This was a testament of faith that had to be honored in person. The following afternoon, a simple black car, without papal flags or a police escort, made its way through the crowded streets of Rome toward the San Basilio district. Pope Leo XIV sat in the back, dressed in a simple white cassock, looking out the window as grand monuments gave way to crumbling apartment buildings and faded storefronts. Their first stop was just across the street from the clinic. The car pulled over and the Pope simply watched. He saw a steady stream of people going in and out, mothers with sick children, elderly men leaning on canes, people whose faces were etched with the hardships of life. And through the window, He could see Dr. Sophia Rossi. She moved from one patient to the next, a whirlwind of compassionate energy. He saw her kneel down to listen to a small child's chest, then rise to place a reassuring hand on the shoulder of an anxious old woman. She was the living, breathing fulfillment of her mother's dream. The Pope's heart swelled with a profound sense of peace. The sacrifice had been immense, but the fruit it bore was beautiful beyond measure. After a few minutes, he gave a quiet instruction to the driver. Their next stop was a few blocks away at a small, noisy restaurant called Trattoria Gallo. He entered alone. The lunch rush was over, and the air smelled of garlic and cleaning soap. A man was sweeping the floor. The Pope asked him, "Forgive me, I'm looking for a woman who works here." "Her name is Lucia Rossi." The man pointed a thumb toward the back. In the kitchen, washing up, the Pope walked toward the sound of clattering dishes. He found Lucia standing over a large metal sink, her back to him, her arms deep in soapy water. She looked smaller than he remembered, and she moved with the slow, deliberate motions of someone whose body ached. "Lucia?" he said gently. She turned, startled, wiping a stray piece of grey hair from her forehead with the back of her wet hand. She saw an old priest in white standing there. Her first thought was that he was lost or perhaps seeking a donation for the local parish. She dried her hands on her worn apron. "Yes, Father. Can I help you?" She didn't recognize him. How could she? The kind cardinal she had met a few times was a memory from another life. This was the Pope, a face she had only seen in newspapers and on television. He saw the confusion in her tired eyes. He smiled, a smile full of warmth and memory that seemed to push back the shadows in the dim kitchen. He took a step closer and spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, asking the one question that could bridge the 20 years that stood between them. "Lucia," he said, "I came to ask you, do you still have the terracotta pot?" The world stopped. The clatter of the restaurant faded away. Her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes searched his face, and suddenly she saw him. Not the Pope, not the leader of the Catholic Church, but the kind-faced cardinal who had listened to her worries on a rainy night so long ago. The man who had given her hope when she had so little. Tears instantly filled her eyes and streamed down her worn cheeks. She could not speak. She could only nod as the past and the present came together in one stunning, miraculous moment. 6 months later, a joyous celebration filled the streets of the San Basilio district. Where a derelict old building once stood, there was now a beautiful new one, gleaming in the Roman sun. It was the inauguration day of Lucia's Hope Clinic. The entire community was there, a crowd buzzing with excitement and gratitude. For the first time, they had a place to receive the best medical care, right in the heart of their neighborhood. Pope Leo XIV had returned to preside over the blessing. As he walked through the clinic's modern, light-filled lobby, he stopped before its most important feature. There, in a simple, beautifully lit glass case, sat the old chipped terracotta pot. On a small brass plaque beneath it, the inscription read, "The first stone of this clinic was not a stone at all, but a mother's faith." Standing on the steps outside, the Pope addressed the cheering crowd. He didn't deliver a formal sermon. Instead, he told them a story. He told them about a waitress named Lucia and her quiet 20-year-long sacrifice. He told them how every coin, earned through exhaustion and endless work, was dropped into a simple clay pot, transforming it from a piece of earthenware into a vessel of pure, unconditional love. This magnificent building, the Pope said, his voice ringing with passion, was not built by the Vatican's wealth. It was built by Lucia's hope. It was built by her faith that her daughter's dream could change the world. He gestured back toward the lobby. That pot is a reminder to us all. It teaches us that the most powerful forces on earth are not armies or governments, but the steady, unrelenting love of a faithful heart. Then he unveiled his final surprise. Next to the case with the original pot, an attendant placed a new, much larger terracotta pot. "The story of this pot must not end today," the Pope declared. "It must be the beginning of 1,000 new stories." He announced the creation of the Lucia's Pot Fund. He explained that any coin the community placed in this new pot, any spare change from their pockets, would be a seed of hope, and for every euro they contributed, a special papal fund would match it tenfold, creating scholarships for their own sons and daughters who dreamed of serving the community. A wave of emotional applause swept through the crowd. This clinic was not just a gift, it was an invitation. As the Pope finished his blessing, An old man made his way forward, reached into his pocket, and dropped a handful of coins into the new pot. The sound of them clinking against the clay was the first note in a new symphony of hope, one that would echo in that community for generations to come. 1 year later, Lucia's Hope Clinic was the vibrant, beating heart of the community. It had served over 5,000 patients, providing everything from life-saving treatments to the simple comfort of a doctor who knew their name. Dr. Sophia Rossi, now free from the weight of her debt, was able to practice medicine with a joyful spirit that inspired her entire staff. The Lucia's Pot Scholarship Fund had been a stunning success, already helping 4 students from the neighborhood begin their studies in nursing and teaching, and Lucia, her health restored and her eyes sparkling with purpose, was the clinic's most beloved volunteer. She no longer washed dishes or cleaned floors. Instead, she sat in the waiting room, reading stories to nervous children or simply holding the hand of an elderly patient who was feeling afraid. She had spent a lifetime serving people, but now she was serving them with a full heart, not a weary one. On the clinic's 1-year anniversary, Pope Leo XIV paid another quiet visit. There was no ceremony this time, no crowd. He simply came to see the miracle in motion. He walked the halls, saw the bustling life within its walls, and ended his visit in Sophia's office, where the 3 of them shared a simple cup of coffee, just as he and Lucia had done all those years ago. As he prepared to leave, the Pope stood once more before the old terracotta pot in the lobby. He looked at its chipped rim and worn surface, and then he looked at Lucia. He thought of the vast treasures of the Vatican, the priceless art, the golden chalices, the ancient manuscripts, and he knew, with a certainty that filled his soul, that none of it was as valuable as the contents this simple pot had once held. The true riches of the church were not locked away in vaults, but lived in the hearts of its people. The quiet, unwavering faith of a mother saving for her child's dream was a treasure beyond any earthly measure. The story of Lucia's pot became a quiet legend, a parable of modern faith told in parishes around the world. It served as a powerful reminder that God does not always work through thunderous miracles or grand pronouncements. More often, he works through the hands of a tired waitress. He works through the steady clink of coins dropped in a jar. He works through the small, daily sacrifices made in the name of love. For it is in these humble acts, these quiet professions of faith, that the greatest hope for our world is truly found. And if we look closely, we will find these hidden saints all around us, quietly changing the world, one small act of love at a time.